has to be and will be a comprehensive crisis management plan individualized for each school. This will facilitate our tactical and our strategic advantage on site. And during the summer hours, we will train at each school. That is one of the major things we have to address as far as our community is school safety. Thank you.
Mr. Gentry?
Well, I want to thank the Leah and the Chamber for letting us be here tonight. I want to thank the Cullman Times and y'all for being here and hosting the forum. One of the first things I think we need to address as law enforcement is our dedication to protecting and serving the needs of every citizen in Cullman County. And as your sheriff, that's what I'm going to do. I believe as law enforcement officers, we have that moral and ethical obligation to protect and serve the needs of every citizen. And as your sheriff, we will be rededicated to serving all the needs of the citizens of Cullman County. I believe that is important. We have to do it on all levels, from enforcement, education, to rehabilitation throughout our communities. And as your sheriff, one of the first things I will do is bring stability to the Cullman County Sheriff's Office. And I will do that through setting a new standard in drug enforcement where we attack it on all levels, from where we will attack the lower level drug distributors to the upper level drug traffickers operating in our community. And I'll do that through using my experience and my training. Another thing we're going to do is hold sex offenders accountable. We cannot allow sex offenders to operate freely within our community. The sheriff must have an open door policy where every citizen in Cullman County can be available to the sheriff. So as a sheriff, I can meet the needs of every citizen. And I can hear their concerns so they can help me drive the sheriff's office in a positive direction for every citizen in Cullman County. I believe we have to be more responsive to victims in our community. I think that's something that is lacking. Throughout the community, one of the biggest things I hear is no responsiveness to the victims within our community. But most importantly, as your sheriff, I will lead the Cullman County Sheriff's Office with honor, integrity, and commitment to every citizen of Cullman County, because I think it is needed, and we have to have that dedication to the citizens of our county. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Big crowd, a lot of press. Didn't have any Saturday morning. It would have been nice. But anyway, just thank y'all for letting me have this opportunity. I want to clear up this sex offender deal that I keep hearing about and have heard about for the last 4 months. In Cullman County, we have a total of 209 sex offenders. There's not 230. Since the new law changed in June of 2011, there's a lot of people have to register now that didn't have to before. This indecent exposure and that kind of thing, a lot more people have to register than they did. I've also had people come and register that had not registered since back in the 80s and should have also. So I think it's great that our numbers are still at just 209. Total number of sex offenders that can have children living with them in Cullman County is 135. Yes, 135 can have a bicycle parked in their front yard. And that's not against the law. Sex offenders they register twice as many times a year now as they ever have. And they're checked once a month. We do address verification once a month. And 57 sex offenders are monitored every day because they're housed in the Cullman County Detention Center. No sex offender, no drug dealer, no farm equipment theft ring, no child abuser, no murderer will be allowed to operate on the honor system as long as I'm Sheriff of Cullman. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Gentry?
Yes.
You'll be up first. Reports have surfaced across the state that heroin is moving into many communities in Alabama, including Cullman County. What knowledge do you have of the heroin problem, and what efforts do you plan to initiate to combat that?
Well, drug enforcement as a whole, I have a lot of knowledge in it. In the last 10+ years, I've been dedicated to drug enforcement in Cullman County. A year and a half or so ago, the media came to me and wanted to know about the rise in heroin. In the last 3 years, I can tell you, as a DEA task force agent, my partner and I have seized $3.5 million in cash, over 600 pounds of cocaine, 100 pounds of meth, 68 that was coming to Cullman County, and about 100 pounds of heroin. Now, heroin is something that is attacking our community, and we can see it in the paper. Last week in Cullman County alone, a 31-year-old male died of a heroin overdose. About a year ago, I talked to one of the command staff at the sheriff's office, and they had already had 15 heroin overdoses. As your sheriff, we will again attack that on all levels, from enforcement to educating the schools to rehabilitation within our jails. And let's talk about enforcement. We have to enforce it where we go after the large-scale drug traffickers. It does us no good to continue to arrest a lower-level drug distributor while we are allowing drug traffickers to operate freely within our community. It does us no good to not work it on all levels. We have to attack our school systems. In December alone, I taught at 3 schools in Cullman County. I hit 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. As I talked to Hansville, Good Hope, and Harmony, I talked to the students, and I asked them, I said, how many of you know somebody that's brought heroin to school? 10% raised their hand. I about fell out on the floor. And as your sheriff, not only will we continue to educate through DARE, but the Drug Enforcement Unit will continue to educate and will educate our schools to stop those children if they hit that pivotal time in their lives. And then as your sheriff, I will coordinate with the jail ministry to rehabilitate people within our facility. Thank you.
I don't know who in the jail staff said that we have a heroin problem here. I talked to Dr. Daly, it's over the emergency room out here at Cullman Hospital, and he says quite the contrary. It may be prevalent in Birmingham, Vestavia, and Hoover, but we have not seen a rise in heroin here in this town. You know, that's just trying to throw you off. You know, we've had a meth problem in Cullman County, is what we've had, you know, for several years. This is one of Matt's co-workers here talking about in 2010, Cullman County being a meth hub. And I know everybody here has heard that. We want to take away from our drug unit and make it sound like there's a new trend. And sometimes it's told that this new trend's eating our community alive now, and sometimes it's told that it's going to be here in 3 years. We don't know what's going to take place. But I promise you, as Sheriff of Cullman County, I've been on top of the meth problem, and I'm sure not going to let the heroin problem take over in Cullman. Right here, City Council meeting, April 2010, where Mr. Gentry asked for help from the Chief of Police and all that. Large uses and abuse of drugs such as meth in Cullman County and the city of Cullman. They asking for your help to report any suspicious activity. We'd like to have some help with the DEA to go after these traffickers and all that kind of stuff, but I haven't heard from Matt Gentry in the last 3.5 years. I don't know of any drug trafficker in Cullman. I've only been here 3.5 years, but I'm looking for them, and I promise you I'll go after them. But these little low-level meth dealers that we've been busting, if you want to call it that, has made a difference in every community in Cullman. Thank you.
I think you've got to look at the techniques we've been using for the last 15 or 20 years. I work narcotics as well, and I can tell you we were over-tasked in certain areas and under-tasked in other areas. I can tell you that when I was working in the narcotics unit, we were getting 8 to 10 calls a day about neighbors making meth. Well, we had other responsibilities tasked to us by the last administration. I'm not saying he was wrong, it's just we had to do surveillance. or we had to make buys. We didn't have anybody to work the labs in the communities. I have a plan that will field a 4-man lab team. Every day they'll go out and be working those labs, knocking on doors. It's a 3-pronged attack, actually. Drugs are our biggest nemesis as law enforcement. Anywhere. It's not specific to Cullman. I've talked to Chief Wade in Tuscaloosa County. I've talked to the Jasper County, Missouri Task Force. It's like this everywhere. As far as the heroin issue goes, it's an accessibility issue. You can make meth in the trunk of your car, but you can't make heroin in the trunk of your car. I think that meth is our biggest problem. It causes our property crimes. I worked in Berkeley for a number of years, and I can tell you, the burglary and thefts are committed by meth addicts. The other part of my 3-pronged attack is interstate drug interdiction. We're taking the money away from the cartel, which that's their biggest asset, is their money. And we're using it against them, and we're taking the drugs off the street. Why have we not done interstate drug interdiction? I don't know. We'll field one of those, and a 4-man lab team will also maintain CNET. Thank you.
Sheriff Rainey,
Yes, sir.
this question is worded a little bit different for Sheriff Rainey because he currently holds the office of sheriff. So what I will do is read Sheriff Rainey's question and then read Mr. Gentry's and Mr. Creel's question before responding. Sheriff Rainey, will there be anything you do differently during your second term as sheriff? And then for Mr. Gentry and Mr. Creel, how will your leadership of the Cullman County Sheriff's Office differ from the present administration?
Could you repeat that before my time starts, please?
Sure. Will there be anything you do differently during a second term as sheriff?
I have no regrets as sheriff. There's no way that I could possibly do any more than what I do. I put in more hours, I promise you, than a lot of people do, day and night. And there's a difference, the way I see it, in a politician and a public servant. I didn't run for sheriff because I had a grudge against anybody. I ran for sheriff because the citizens needed help out here. People were getting mad because it was taking too long and nobody would do anything about their meth problem next door to their house and the meth labs. They knew it was going on, but nobody would do anything. And I saw that. I ran for sheriff because of that. I'm proud of my record. You know, when people see the difference in what you've done, you know, I have no regrets in what I've done. And you know, I'm blessed to have had this opportunity, and I have no regrets. And I think we've made a difference. I really do. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. Creel?
Question is, what would I do differently?
How will your leadership of the Cullman County Sheriff's Office differ from the present administration?
That's a very difficult question, and I'll tell you why. I can tell you what I would do, but I can't compare it to what Sheriff Rainey's doing because I'm not in the know. I see on the surface what he's done. I have a personal opinion that Sheriff Rainey and Matt Gentry, the reason they want this job is to serve everybody out here, just like I do. Have never been enemies, nor will we ever be enemies. The difference is, I don't know if he's doing any of this stuff. If he's not, I would encourage him to. I have a anti-burglary, anti-theft information brief that I would like to present to the community at neighborhood watch meetings. We need to use our resources in the community. Our rural mail carriers are out there every day. They go to the same house every day. They see the same cars every day. We need to tap into those resources. Our rotation record drivers, neighborhood watch, town hall meetings, like I said, church groups. We've got to involve the community. I'm not saying that Sheriff Rainey don't involve the community. I just have a different approach to that. The town hall meetings is a big issue, in my opinion. I think we need to have deputies at every one of them, but it don't need to be a one-way street, communication-wise. Deputies should understand what the problems are in the community, take it back to the staff. The staff should address those problems, and in the next consecutive meeting, the deputy should go back and brief the community, hey, this is what we've done about A, B, and C. So that again would take a long answer for me to answer that question, just like the first one. I'm not critical of his job, and I'm not critical of him as a person. I just know what I can do, and like to have an opportunity. Thank you.
To go back on the previous question, just so everybody knows, I appreciate Sheriff Rainey for this. He asked me to be his drug unit commander when he took office, and I had to deny that position to go on to a higher position. But since I have been at the DEA task force, I've indicted 5 individuals for the CNET since I have been in office. So I have been here working every day for the last 3 years. But as your sheriff, the first thing I will do is be the sheriff of Cullman County. And I will set the tone for the entire sheriff's office. I will not give that responsibility to another individual. I will be the person that the citizens of Cullman County elect as their sheriff. And I will set that standard of accountability and availability through my entire office for the citizens of Cullman County. And as availability to the citizens is as important as the enforcement of the laws as being the sheriff of Cullman County. Because you have to be available to the citizens to know what is going on in the community. And that's one of the things I will do as your sheriff, is I will be part of the community. So I know what is going on in each individual community, because each one is different. Bayleton's different than Jones Chapel. But the only way you will know that and know how to lead your sheriff's office is by being in the community day in and day out. And as your sheriff, I will do that. And I will have a command staff that holds individuals within the sheriff's office accountable so it can provide the citizens of Cullman County with the most professional and proficient law enforcement officers that you can possibly have and what you deserve. I think that's what we expect. We expect when we have a need that the most professional and proficient law enforcement officers come to our house. And as your sheriff, I will provide that. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Creel. The state of Alabama has few minimum standards in place for someone to run for sheriff. But last year in Baldwin County, they were awarded legislation that increased the age for a person to qualify for sheriff and established more educational and training standards. What are your thoughts on creating higher standards for qualifying to run for sheriff in Cullman County?
You can't lower the standards to meet the individual. I've said that many times. I was in the military for 24 years, and simply, if you don't meet the standard, you don't have the job, whether it's a mid-level supervisor job or you're running a whole company. To lower the standards is taking a step back. I think you also have to look at not only the sheriff, but everyone who works for him. The state requires minimum standards for you to pass the police academy. You have to be able to, certain academic standards as well as physical fitness standards. But I know for a fact, most of the law enforcement agencies in Alabama don't require a minimum physical fitness standard to be maintained throughout your career, which is wrong, and I'm going to fix that. Thank you.
I do not agree in lowering the standards to run for the office of sheriff. If you lower the standards to run for the office of sheriff, what you are saying is I want a second-rate person to lead my community. And I, one, as a citizen of Cullman County, do not want a second-rate person leading my community. I think the standards for sheriff ought to be set higher. I believe that you ought to be held accountable and have a higher standard of education, of law enforcement experience and background, It is a job that requires the service and the protection of all the citizens of Cullman County. And I think you as a whole do not want somebody that does not meet minimum standards running your sheriff's office, which today at the Cullman County Sheriff's Office is a multi-million-dollar a year business. So if you're asking for lower standards, then you as the citizens are asking for lower response time, lower productivity within the law enforcement agency. I think you have to raise the standards within your department. I believe as the sheriff, if my policy says you wear a brown uniform, light brown, dark brown pants, and clean shaven, you have to meet those standards that you set as the sheriff of Cullman County. So we have to be held to that higher standard. And as the sheriff, that's what the people of Cullman County expect. And so I believe in higher standards for law enforcement. Thank you.
Man doesn't like my goatee. But anyway, I did talk with Mr. Gentry, during the transition time there, and he told me he had this promotion and he was going to work another $15,000 a year to be able to work outside Cullman County. And I told him we talked about that money, but he chose to go to Birmingham or wherever, and he has helped us some here. 5 arrests or 5 indictments here in Cullman County on a $250,000 for 4 years. That doesn't impress me any. But anyway, how you going to be in, you talk about being in the office so Verna can come see you, open door policy, and then you talk about getting out here and being in all these communities to see how everybody's going to treat you and how you need to treat them. As far as minimum standards, I think there's 2 sheriffs in the state of Alabama that had no law enforcement experience whatsoever. And they like it just like it is. They don't want to hear anybody talk about setting any different standards. But the standards should be, there should be some law enforcement experience, no doubt. I think it's got to help the sheriff as a person and be able to do his job. There's no doubt about that. And as far as making it less, not have to have any more credentials or education to be able to become a sheriff, I don't think that would help anybody. Maybe raise the standard would probably be good. But in these counties, it's got to be voted on by the people anyway. It's a legislative act just like a lot of other things. Thank you.
Mr. Gentry? What's your viewpoint on the Alabama's current gun legislation?
Number one, I'm 1,000% pro Second Amendment. I believe as every citizen that can lawfully possess and own a firearm, I believe they should. But I believe as a sheriff of Cullman County, it's my job to educate my deputies to the laws that are passed. I believe if you're a citizen and you can legally possess and own that firearm and you want to carry one and protect yourself, then I want you to do that. But I had an occurrence the other day at a store out in the county, and I had a guy ask me, he said, "You're running for sheriff." He said, "With the new law, how old do you got to be to get a pistol permit? How old can you be?" I said, 18 years old. He said, "Well, that's funny. I've asked 5 deputies. All 5 of them gave me different answers." It is my job as a sheriff of Cullman County to educate my deputies to the new gun laws. And I believe in the gun law in itself. I mean, it's not really changed as a whole, it's just clarified a few things. With open carry, we've always been open carry, but now if you carry your vehicle, you don't have to have a permit. You can lock your ammo up in the trunk, put your firearm up front. So it's not changed a lot as a whole, except it's given citizens an opportunity to carry in public places, with the responsibility being on those business owners to deny them the right to come into their business carrying that firearm. But again, I'm pro Second Amendment, and I believe if you meet those 3 requirements, you should have that legal right to carry. Now, most people don't know the 3 things that will keep you from carrying a firearm. If you were convicted of a felony, convicted of domestic violence, or you've been deemed mentally incompetent. And one area that I think we fail as law enforcement on is the issue with domestic violence. And as your sheriff, my deputies will be trained to that issue. That if that person is convicted of domestic violence, they are not allowed to possess that firearm. And they will remove those firearms from the homes. Thank you.
My opponents have said that they're pro-Second Amendment. I think it was a Dodge City forum they had that I didn't get to go to. They talked about being pro-Second Amendment, but they would go back and subpoena people's medical records to be able to see if they could have a firearm or not. They also said that the law that they were thinking about passing, where you would be able to carry a firearm in a vehicle without a permit, they thought that would be okay as long as you kept it covered up and that kind of thing. I'm pro-Second Amendment, and in your home and in your vehicle, as long as you don't have a felony against you, or if you're legally able to get a permit, you should be able to carry what you want to, however you want to. Talking about the firearms, my guys not knowing what the law is there, I'll call them when we leave here and I'll have a little class tonight, I promise you. But anyway, it's always been 18 years and above for the sheriff's discretion to issue a permit. A lot of them didn't, and that's a lot of the problem that what brought this change in the law here. I've always issued 18-year-old and over with an application. I had a separate application made, and I would have a parent or guardian sign off on that they had some type of training or was familiar with a firearm to be able to carry a permit. But I'm all about guns, I promise you. Thank you.
I did say I was pro-Second Amendment in Dodge City, but I don't remember saying that it's okay to keep it in a car if it's covered up. I don't care where it's at. Personally, as a law enforcement officer now, I'd rather see the gun on them. That way you can tell if they're going for it. As far as subpoenaing records, I still say that if it came to issue a permit for someone, and we wasn't sure about we knew that they had been dealt with by probate, and they had some sort of mental issue, yeah, I would go as far as subpoenaing the records, because I don't want to violate anybody's Second Amendment rights, but I also don't want to put the guns in the hand of some, unstable person. As far as SB 354, that's the one that Senator Beeson introduced that got knocked down, allowing you to carry a gun in your vehicle. It's not going to affect law enforcement as long as they're following procedure and know what they're doing and follow their instinct. I'm probably going to bring some heat on the set, but I'll tell you what it is. The reason the Sheriff's Association was against that was they were afraid it was going to lessen their pistol permit sales. It's a money thing, which is ridiculous. I called Sheriff Roden and said, hey, the ex-Sheriff Roden, not this one here, his son, and I said, hey, how much did we generate off of pistol permits every year when you were in there? He said, about $200,000. So you can figure somewhere like Baldwin County or Jefferson County how much money they would get off of that. It was a money issue. It's not a safety issue for deputies as long as they're following procedure. Thank you.
Sheriff Rainey, you're up next.
Yes, sir.
Most sheriffs in Alabama receive what is commonly called meal money to feed the inmates within the county jails or county incarceration system. This system is allowed by the state and essentially puts taxpayers' dollars into a private bank account of sheriffs for the purpose of feeding the inmates. What are your feelings about this? Will you put forth an effort to ask lawmakers to change this, or do you approve of the system and why?
I think we went through this, did we not, Mr. Cullman? October the 18th, 2010, did we not? And I'll be glad to answer it again. What I told you then is what I stand by now. I said to the people of Cullman County at the forum, how can you feed an inmate 3 meals a day on $1.75 and have money left over. That's word for word for what I said. I have a copy of it right here. At that particular time, I didn't know there was federal inmate money. And thank God there is. When I became sheriff, I paid the ex-sheriff for his supply of food that was there at the jail. I came in a month early